Thank you for tuning in to Mystic Magic. My name is Celeste A. Frazier, and I'm your hostess. Today's episode is entitled Mother Earth. This is episode 4 of Mystic Magic, and we are about to embark on a wonderful journey with a mystic, a biblical theologian, a professor, a truly wise and deep soul, Dr. Will Coleman. And we will be exploring all the many ways that he is enlightening the planet with his teachings based on his studies in Greek, Latin, Rosicrucianism, African spirituality, and more. It's a good one. Stay tuned. This is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives. Good morning, Mystic Magic podcasters. You are so blessed to this day by Dr. Will Coleman, who is our guest. Dr. Will is a phenomena in and of himself, and yet he is nomina. He is a biblical scholar. He is a spiritual teacher. He's been teaching. I've seen him in Chicago and California. I know he's been all over teaching. I first met him through Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith, my teacher. And he said, well, if you're a minister, you got to know Dr. Will Coleman. So of course I went to find Dr. Will Coleman, and I'm so glad that I did. Oh, I want to say maybe about 14 years ago or so, I started embarking on in study with him, and he's been taking me through some very rich things. He's a very well-known theologian, and he has wonderful things going on. He's a professor, and I'll let him tell you more, but we're just very pleased to help me welcome Dr. Will Coleman. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. I'm just
too.
really jazzed that we're here together. Among all the many ways that you've been learning and teaching in so many disciplines, I know that you are a teacher of biblical spirituality. What other faiths or philosophies interest you in the spiritual spectrum, other than Christianity, of course?
Yeah, so I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. We can talk more about that. And I grew up in a family that, although we were Christian, Baptist, Methodist, etc., my family was actually pretty open. My most immediate parents were pretty open to my explorations and interests in other disciplines and other spiritual traditions. So I really began my studies in a certain sense in Greek mythology. And then I became, of course, a member and very active in the Pentecostal church my parents were members of, but I also had relatives who were Baptists and Methodists. So we were more open to diversity within our Christian leanings. And then I attended a Presbyterian college there in Memphis. I was a religion major there. And from there, I came here to Decatur, Georgia, where I went to a Presbyterian seminary. And during the period between completing seminary in 1985 and going on to graduate school in Berkeley in 1988, I became interested in studies like Kabbalah, the Jewish Hebrew mysticism, and also I had a pretty keen interest in Taoism and the attendant philosophies and practices of Qigong, Tai Chi, etc. So I would say secondary to my studies in specific Christian orientation, Taoism was a keen interest of mine. And then we'll talk more about Kabbalah itself, which of course comes from the Jewish tradition, but also has some other ways in which it has spread out in Christian and non-Christian forms of metaphysical studies and mysticism. So I've always had a Catholic, in the sense of universal, interest in knowledge, philosophy, metaphysics, and spirituality, and very much also interested in and have been initiated, connected with traditional African spiritualities of Ifa and Voodoo.
Yes. So rich, so rich.
Very much so.
I know you speak many languages. What are they, and how does language help you in being a biblical
Yes,
teacher, theologian?
very much so. So I guess like many students in high school, I had a couple of years of French. Didn't take it too seriously, but I took it serious enough. I was pretty good with it in French. And then when I attended the seminary I mentioned here in Decatur, we were required to study both, or at least have an introductory knowledge of both Hebrew and Greek. So I had those two in that respect. And then going on to do my PhD, I had to do more research with French and German. So over the period of trajectory of my educational experiences, those were required. But more specifically to your point, I became especially interested in revisiting the Hebrew and the Greek as research languages to better help me understand the biblical text as a metaphysical book, also as a book that is very much predicated upon a knowledge of the original languages. And my interest in therefore also in mysticism caused me to want to continue to probe deeper into the Hebrew. And so that's a synopsis of my interest in languages. Why is it important? Because I think for many years and centuries, most of us, and I do teach seminary students, as you mentioned, have not really had access to the original text or original languages of what we call the Bible. And I discovered that that is really indispensable. And in our own age and time of technology, it is more accessible. So I strongly encourage my students to be more in touch with the original text and context of the Bible rather than rely primarily upon English translations, because that's someone else's work, which is all right, but it's better, especially if you're going to be a spiritual leader, using the text to have some working facility with it. So I try to lead by example in doing that. And
Well, you certainly opened my eyes in terms of just basic things, like Adam really coming from Adama, which means the earth.
yes,
And
Mother Earth.
yes. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want us to talk a little bit about Mother Earth today. That seemed to resonate with you.
Yes.
And Mother Earth is actually getting a break right now, so we're happy about that.
Yeah, she has us in the house. she has
Yeah,
the children in the house while she rejuvenates herself. So to
yes.
that point, again, because many of us have been relying upon English translations and all often upon male-centered interpretations of in the translations, we are not as aware of the presence and power of the feminine that is in the original text and in the original context. And as you just mentioned, from the outset, if you read the book of Genesis, the first 2 or 3 chapters, there are references to what is called earth in the English Germanic language. It's called Adama, or 2 things called Aretz, but also called Adama, very specifically. And as you just mentioned, the first human being who's not a man, Adama is a description of a being, male and female. So the first human being in this description, this narrative, is extracted from Adama, Mother Earth. And it's such a powerful poetic way of understanding the human being because, again, the word Adam is right in the middle of Ha-Adama, and as though the human being is extracted from the womb of Mother Earth, and therefore is a part of the Earth and part of the ecology of the planetary systems. And so revisiting the original words and meanings and text and context discloses things that simply are not available because they don't sound the same, they don't look the same in the English translation as they do, for example, in this instance, in the Hebrew.
Well, I know you have a tendency to kind of elongate or pronounce certain things in different ways. What is that? What causes that?
Yeah, so I want myself and the listener to hear the accentuations. Sometimes it's easier to hear it than it is for me simply to describe it. And then also probably part of it from my grandmother, my paternal grandmother had a way of saying things, the same thing several different ways to make sure you got it.
Okay.
If you didn't get it one way, you get it another way. So I do have a tendency to elongate. I also have a tendency to repeat the same thing a different way. It's just in that sense, an ancestral grandmama taught me how to do this way of saying and emphasizing certain things.
Okay.
Because
Now
people
you,
learn different ways. And so I'm sensitive to, I have learned different ways by hearing, seeing the intonation. And so I incorporate that into my teaching.
okay, wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Now how are you feeling about Mother Earth right now?
I feel that she's renewed. However, what we now call this pandemic or virus, etc., has got started. We may never know the complete story about that. This is definitely a time when the planet is rejuvenating. I mean, you can tell the air looks cleaner.
Yes.
Not want to call them animals, other beings are more
Mm-hmm.
present, and uh, our lack of busyness. Um, Foliages look better. So overall, I think this is definitely a rejuvenation season. And it's so funny in this context that it occurs, at least from a Christian point of view, during the season of Lent, which was
Mm.
began, which
Yeah.
ironically is a time of letting go, of releasal, of, as it were, sacrifice, anticipating renewal. So it's a powerful cycle that we are being called upon also to adapt and adjust and transform as well. I talk about that a lot in my own classes.
Well, yeah, what is that relationship that we have with Earth? What is it designed to really be?
So,
Not some dominion in terms of destroying, but
no. If we take a cue from, let's say, Genesis chapter 1, what we'll notice is that the patterns of creation go through a series of cycles of night and day and earth and water and air and sun, moon, stars, flying creatures, swimming creatures, then finally last land creatures and the human being. And at the point in Genesis 1:26 through 30, where the human being Adam is materialized, then Adam is given really stewardship within these processes of creation. So, to your point, the true role should be that of a custodian or steward, and not someone who dominates and or abuses its relationship with other living beings. That's what's important. That's why I don't say animals, but with other living beings who are our relatives, especially from Native American traditions, and in a way are our predecessors. They were here before, from an evolutionary point of view. They were here before we got here.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I think about the people, for example, in Feinhorn in Great Britain, they seem to have a relationship with the earth, with the vegetation that was a language of listening.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if now is an opportunity for us to listen. How do you see our relationship in terms of communicating with other living beings?
Absolutely. I go to the park every day, several times a day. There's a nice park nearby here in Decatur. And in my own imagination, I listen to the trees. I watch the trees. I listen to the trees. I ask them about their resilience for being for decades and hundreds of years. And part of the insight that has come to me is, it's go deep, let your roots go deep and take nutrients from the earth, stand tall. And then when adversity or difference appears, you bend and then you sway back. And so that just having that meditative dialogue is important. Also, I think it's important for us to pay attention to what other beings are doing in this season who are not necessarily affected the same way or reacting the same identical way that we are at this time in this period of adjustment. So having communication with awareness of, first of all, and or communication with other life forms is extraordinarily important. This virus, however we think of it, is a sentient life force and is causing adjustment. As small as it is
Yes.
mandating an adjustment.
Yes.
You can't ignore that. You've got to pay attention to what it
Yes.
is doing and how it has mutated and how it is pushing
It's
us to mutate.
yes, it's causing us to go within. It's causing us to connect with source. It's causing us to really be still and know,
Yes, if we
rather
take the
than
opportunity, yes, for sure.
not just simply reading it in
Mm-hmm.
the Bible, but actually
Experiencing
create,
it.
yeah, creating an opportunity that is undeniable.
Yes.
Wow, but there's so many rich levels to your teaching. Rosicrucianism is one. I mean, I don't even know how to begin to describe Rosicrucianism, and the depth and the embodiment of this kind of mystical understanding. Can you share with our audience a little bit about how you see Rosicrucianism?
I can describe how I came in contact with it. So my last year of seminary, 1984-85, I came across works of Carl Jung and his volumes, particularly on alchemy and psychology. There was a reference to Rosicrucianism in them, several of his works, and also to the word Kabbalah, spelled with a C-A, Kabbalah. And it just it became a bookmark in my mind. And then subsequently, after I finished seminary, I wanted to do some studies that were different from what I'd been doing and venture a bit into esoteric studies. And from that, someone suggested to me that I look at all things, the tarot cards. And I said, okay. I went to a metaphysical bookstore here in Atlanta at that time called the Sphinx. And I was immediately drawn to a specific deck. And I began to explore it and use it and meditate with it primarily for my own purposes. Took a correspondence course, and then I came again across the word Kabbalah, this time spelled with a Q. And as I did more research of what seemed to be the theory behind the cards, I was opened up to this entire field of metaphysical studies that I had not heard of directly before, joined several fraternal related orders, and within those, again, as you just mentioned, the word Rosicrucianism came up. So Rosicrucianism has, like so many other movements, a legendary and historical aspect. The legendary aspect is about a group of German monks during the 1500s who are seeking knowledge from North Africa to bring back to Europe. And this knowledge includes esoteric knowledge about Christianity, but also about other, what would be called Hermetic studies. And this becomes the foundation for something that would later become known as Rosicrucianism. Historically, Rosicrucianism has been a movement that grew out of, you can say, the German Protestant mystical Reformation of the 1500s, and then inspired organizations perhaps like Freemasonry, like Rosicrucianism itself, like Theosophy, for persons who wanted to study and practice the knowledge that was a part of the Western trajectory, but more under the current, Gnosticism, mystical Christianity, etc. Science, a different type of science, outside of quote unquote empirical science, but more metaphysical science. And so throughout Germany, France, England, especially in the mid 1800s, early 1900s, you had various groups that appeared on the scene and said that they were either Rosicrucian or Rosicrucian inspired. So that's kind of the historical backdrop to it. And my interest initially in studying the cards led to that type of research and association with various Rosicrucian organizations. So in a nutshell, it is an approach to reality that is metaphysical and that incorporates both the theory and the practice of psycho-spiritual transformation, mental spiritual transformation, physical physiology as well.
And, you know, this is really based on some real ancient knowledge.
It is.
So like the Kybalion is informing us of just the whole premise of life itself in so many ways, the different laws and, you know, polarity and correspondence and all of this. And how does this kind of weave through this esoteric study that goes back past the 15th century?
Yes, so the legendary connection and the another type of trajectory that you indicate, we take the Kybalion as an example, written by 3 initiates, inspired by the works of an Egyptian savant called Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes thrice great, Egyptian, of course, mystic, philosopher, etc. Mythological in some respects, but the idea that ancient wisdom comes from Northeast Africa, i.e. Egypt, and then through Greco and Roman mystery traditions is the inspiration for that particular text. It probably was written by William Walker Atkinson,
Yeah.
who was inspired at the time by some of the same movements I'm referring to of the early 1900s. Nevertheless, it is an attempt, as is the other material, to see a trajectory that began in, as I stated before, Egypt / Northeast Africa, parts of what now is called Asia Minor, and then from there spread through Greek, Rome, Europe, and other places.
Well,
United
everything
States.
starts in Africa, right?
Absolutely. The languages, Hebrew, Greek, Latin, in particular, Hebrew has associations with Kemetic language, as far as we can tell. Then the language that we speak now, ultimately, English, even though it's called English, is derived from Germanic and Greek Latin sources, which in turn are located in North Africa, in terms of where the Bible originated and where most of our literary inspiration comes.
What about the culture of the Egyptian peoples that informs this whole Hermetic vibration, if you will? What is it that we know about the roots of spirituality, call it African spirituality or call it any kind of spirituality?
Well, again, though there's more for myself in terms of my experience, because I'm so keen on the importance of learning the language first and foremost, and have not studied the Kemetic language to any great depth. Then for me, it is come more through my studies of the Hebrew language and culture, and what the Hebrews apparently learned from the Egyptians. And so, so many of the thought forms and ideas that have come across and through as in the Hebrew language and Hebrew text have their origins in some aspect of Egyptian ideas, because they were there by their own stories, were there for 400 years. And so they absorbed the wisdom, knowledge, and practices there, and then transformed them into a particular aspect that then became the foundation for the Hebrew Bible and Hebrew text. So too with the Greeks. So our knowledge is not as direct from a linguistic point of view, at least from my point of view, and of the Egyptian as it is of its influence on the Hebrew / Jewish, Christian, and Greek and Roman philosophy, politics, etc. But there's no doubt that they were very deep and profound thinkers and practitioners of metaphysics, because for centuries they have been such an inspiration for orders and societies that have originated through that inspiration.
What about the Voodoo? That whole level of
spirit? That's West African mysticism from my point of view. When I did my doctoral work at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, that's where I was, I guess, like formally in terms of an academic pursuit, introduced to not voodoo. I'm glad you said voodoo, not voodoo, which is a distortion and misinterpretation of it, but voodoo as the tradition of mysteries of West African origins. And so, in addition to my initial study, I subsequently became an initiate in Haitian Voodoo, and as I stated, also in African Ifa. And these are traditions that are nature-based traditions, spiritualities. They are also based on an understanding of the relationship and correlation between who I am as an individual, as the microcosm, and my interactions with the macrocosm, other forces of nature, whether they are mineral, whether they are plants, whether they are so-called animals, and or other humans. So this interconnectivity is a strong, very strong emphasis in traditions like Voodoo and Ifa, and have strong correlations with what we call ancient wisdom. Very strong correlations with Northeast African Hebrewism, for example. So when our African ancestors were introduced to, especially what is called the Old Testament, they recognized similarities.
Sure.
It's amazing. Mm-hmm.
Now, how do you pronounce your other name? Baba, Esu Yemi?
Okay, so Baba, Esu Ifa Yemi. So that's a good point. When you're initiated into, I guess, any tradition, but also particularly an African spiritual tradition, then it's a rebirthing. And the process is a rebirthing. And in the process of the rebirthing, you receive a new name. So Babalao is a title, which means Father of the Mysteries. Awo, A-W-O, means mysteries, West African mysteries. Babalao is a father of the mysteries. And then the particular Orisha, or you can say guardian spirit in a way of speaking, to which I'm also connected, is the one of communication. That's Esu. So it's Esu Yemi, means Esu fits me, or Esu suits me. This is my connection with the powers of communication. And then Ifa Yemi pertains to the spirit of interpretation, of how you understand and apply the teachings of the mysteries. So that likewise, then Ifa, or the spirit of interpretation, also suits me. So when a person has what's called an association with a particular Orisha, they also share the attributes of that, or some attribute of that Orisha, of that guardian spirit. So all the names have meanings, is what's important.
Yeah, and they do add up to Dr. Will Coleman, don't they?
That's right. Yeah, they do. That's exactly right. And that's what happens is that in a consultation, what people call readings, there's more of a confirmation of the path that you've been taking that connects you with a particular ritual or guardian spirit. It's not that they take over your life, they come to assist you in what you are already doing and pursuing, and to help you get more clarity and more assistance in doing that.
I just want to ask one more thing about Kabbalah, which I've been fascinated with for a while. What is it about Kabbalah? We associate it more with Judaism, and yet it seems to be more African in
well,
many
Judaism
ways.
is African from my point of view, yes.
well, I mean, in the sense of not limited to one particular religion or group of people.
No. So the word itself, Kabbalah, means to receive. Kabbalah is receiving, and receiving, it is has grown out of oral and literary interpretations of the Torah, of the Hebrew text, that incorporate practice and theory that is metaphysically based. So it has incorporated over the centuries techniques similar to kind of yoga, and as you already indicated, similar to an expansive and open non-sectarian orientation for one's life. And therefore, it has developed within Judaism, but also outside of it. As I mentioned before, when I first came across it, it was spelled with a C. So that's a kind of more of a Christian, mystical, Hebraic understanding. And then the particular form that I was introduced to first and foremost with the cards is spelled with a Q. So it's more hermetic, not Jewish or Christian, but some will call it more of a magical Renaissance inspired form. So all three trajectories historically have their roots in the Hebraic, quote unquote, Jewish, Northeast African origins, but have also then proliferated into other forms. That is what has made it non-sectarian, from my point of view.
Yes.
And that it allows you, I think it allows you a certain type of diversity that you can incorporate other components from other traditions or correspond other traditions to what you're doing in your particular practice of Kabbalah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought forward the association with tarot. Many people kind of have this woo-woo interpretation of tarot, without seeing the underlying meanings that are so deep, and train our minds when we're studying them to look beyond the appearances, which is really metaphysical in nature. You came to Science of Mind. I keep saying I'm going to close, but I have so much I want to explain.
Go ahead.
I am going to close soon.
Yeah,
but
you say when.
You came into Science of Mind to play with us, or perhaps we're playing with you. But
both.
But what is the relationship that caused you to want to move into looking at Science of Mind a little closer?
Yes, so as you indicated earlier, when I did my very first presentation for Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith at the Revelation 2009 conference, after I had done my presentation at this particular point on a metaphysical interpretation of Exodus chapter 4, so many people came to me and said, wow, this is exactly very similar to the kind of things that we teach, understand, etc. That was my first introduction to quote unquote Science of Mind and New Thought formally. That was my first introduction. But the revelation I had was that the similarities in my own trajectory and what I subsequently became to know better in Science of Mind were parallel. And so as I then went back and studied more closely the works of Ernest Holmes and others, I could see the in some instances, almost point by point correspondences between that and the Hermetic Rosicrucian tradition that I had myself at that juncture become steeped in. And so I found a very close kinship, friendly environment in which I could share what I've learned from my point of view with others who were of like mind. And also I could see that there was an undercurrent of correspondences between the example you gave of the Kybalion, just one example, between that, which I was already steeped in, and Science of Mind, which I was becoming introduced to. And, as you know, every Monday night since 2010, I have led a pro bono course for anyone on the theme of Bible and meditation, but we've covered a variety of topics, the Science of Mind textbook, we covered the Kybalion, we covered the Master Key system, we covered just almost 4 years spending time with the 12 Powers, ironically, which was a very thin book, but we combed it.
Yes.
And I'm now still looking at a variety of texts from a metaphysical point of view in the Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. So,
well, I'm sure our audience would like to hear more about you and what you have to offer. What classes or books or events or programs would you like to promote on Mystic Magic?
So I primarily still, tonight, every Monday night, I teach a pro bono class on the theme of Bible meditation. You can reach me through W. Coleman, Coleman, PhD 33 @gmail.com. We usually log, and I will send you the invitation link to join me. And we usually begin at 8 o'clock with general conversation on things that we've talked about the previous week, etc. You can come in or out at any time. And then I begin formally focusing on the text or topic of the evening at 8:30, and we go from 8:30 to 9:30. So tonight I'm talking about this COVID-19 in relation with Revelation chapter 22, verses 1 through 5, and the focus on water. I call it this: water, roots, and leaves, because that's alluded to, but holistic healing and health from a metaphysical point of view, using this particular text and in light of this current situation. And it's ongoing, so anyone can join at any time. And we, as you already know yourself, cover a variety of topics under that rubric of the biblical text.
Well, I want our viewers to know that's Eastern time.
Eastern time, that's correct. Eastern time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I am just so grateful that you said yes to come and be with us today.
Me too. I'm
sure that the viewers and listeners must know that This is just a drop in the bucket of the depth and the breadth of what you have to offer. And yes, you will always be enriched by the presence of Dr. Will Coleman. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
I appreciate you. I thank God for you.
Same here.
Namaste.
Namaste. And Ashe.
Ashe. God, you are wind, rain, sun. You are that which moves, refreshes, and lights the world that I know. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Reverend Celeste A. Frazier, and this is Mystic Magic. We will be back next Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific Time, when the topic will be widening the curve. And our guest will be the brilliant Dr. Maisha Hazard. Please be sure to see our show notes at mystic.magic.buzzsprout.com for more information about today's topics. Please leave a review, and for more podcasts, please subscribe. If this episode has been good for you, feel free to support the show. You can also find Mystic Magic at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and other podcast venues. This is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirits to understand our lives.